Have you ever wondered how many people die because someone chose not to press a button? The question hangs in the darkness. Then two words appear on screen glowing red: claim denied. Underneath, smaller code mismatch. This is the story of a shy girl who discovered that silence isn't just golden, sometimes it's deadly. Claire Morgan had been invisible for 29 years, and she'd perfected the art. At HaleCare's corporate headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel, she occupied a gray cubicle on the third floor. Her job title was Medical Coding Auditor, which meant she reviewed insurance claims to make sure diagnosis codes matched medical records. One wrong number could transform an approval into a denial, treatment into delay, hope into heartbreak. But Claire never made waves. She kept her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes fixed on her screen, her voice barely audible in meetings. The other auditors barely remembered her name. Her supervisor called her "that quiet one" when assigning files. Even the security guard at the front desk had to check her badge twice before recognizing her. Being a shy girl in a corporation of ambitious climbers had its advantages. No one watched what she did. No one questioned her overtime. No one noticed when she started looking at files she wasn't assigned to review. And no one suspected that this inspirational transformation was about to begin with a name she'd been trying to forget. The file appeared on her screen at 3:47 on a Tuesday afternoon. Patient 447239. Claire's finger froze on the mouse when she saw the name. Not the patient's name that belonged to Thomas Reed, 72, retired teacher, lung cancer diagnosis, pending insurance approval, but the diagnosis code. J18.9. Pneumonia unspecified. It was wrong. She knew it immediately because she'd seen this exact error before, 3 years ago, on a different file, one that had belonged to James Morgan, her father. The memory crashed over her like a wave, sitting in a sterile hospital room, watching her father struggle for breath, listening to doctors explain that the treatment had been delayed due to an insurance coding error. By the time they corrected it, 6 weeks had passed. 6 weeks that turned treatable into terminal. She'd been 26 then, working retail, barely making rent, completely lost in the maze of medical bureaucracy. She'd blamed herself for not understanding the system faster, for not fighting harder, for not knowing that a single misplaced digit could steal someone's father. Now staring at Thomas Reed's file, Claire noticed something that made her blood run cold. A small tag in the corner, approved for retention. Someone had already reviewed this error and decided to keep it. Claire's hands trembled as she pulled up the company directory. She scrolled past rows of names until she reached the executive floor. Richard Hale, CEO, 35 years old, Harvard MBA, net worth estimated at $40 million. In 6 years, she'd seen him exactly twice, both times from a distance, moving through the building, like weather, untouchable and unaware. She opened a new email. Subject line: urgent audit concern. Then she paused. What was she doing? She was the shy girl who never spoke up in meetings, the one who ate lunch alone, the one who'd spent 3 years keeping her head down and her grief private. What made her think anyone would listen now? But then she looked at Thomas Reed's file again. 72 years old, someone's father, someone's grandfather, someone who deserved better than becoming acceptable loss. Claire began typing. Not a polite inquiry, not a careful suggestion. Just facts laid bare in a way that couldn't be ignored. Outside her cubicle, her supervisor walked past without glancing in. The office hummed with its usual rhythm keyboards, clicking coffee brewing, small talk floating through the air. No one noticed the shy girl who was about to set everything on fire. But they would. What happens when the quietest person in the room finally speaks up, and the truth she reveals could destroy everyone? That evening, Claire didn't send the email. Instead, she spent the night reviewing her father's medical records, every denied claim, every appeal letter, every phone call that led nowhere. She'd blamed herself for 3 years. But now, seeing that approved for retention tag, a different truth emerged. The system hadn't failed by accident. It had failed by design. The next morning, Claire arrived early and escalated Thomas Reed's file directly to senior management with a correction report. Within 90 minutes, her supervisor, Jennifer, appeared. "Claire, we need to chat. You escalated a file outside standard protocol." "The diagnosis code was incorrect," Claire said softly. "The patient's claim would be denied." "There's a process. You flag the error, it goes through automated review, then senior staff evaluates it." "The system already reviewed it. Someone tagged it for retention." Jennifer's smile flickered. "Those administrative tags aren't within your audit scope. If you see them, ignore them." "Understood." Claire looked up and saw something heartbreaking Jennifer knew. She'd known for years, and she'd chosen survival. "I understand," Claire said, but she didn't delete the escalation. By afternoon, Thomas Reed's correction was approved. He'd receive his treatment on time. One person saved. One small victory in a system designed to produce countless quiet defeats. Claire began reviewing older files after hours. The pattern emerged like a constellation: expensive cancer treatments, miscoded as minor infections, cardiac procedures marked as routine checkups. Every miscoded file delayed or denied claims. Every file carried the same tag. She documented 47 files in 3 weeks. 47 patients whose lives hung in the balance while accountants calculated acceptable loss. Then her phone lit up: performance review scheduled for tomorrow, 2 p.m. with Melissa Grant, VP of Operations. That night, she backed up her spreadsheet to 3 separate cloud services and a thumb drive. Melissa Grant's 7th-floor office overlooked the city. She was 52, impeccably dressed with decades of corporate polish. "Claire, your error catch rate is remarkable. However, I notice you've been accessing files outside your assigned queue. Can you explain why?" "I was tracking error patterns." "That's initiative. But your role is to review assigned files through proper channels. Pulling archived cases creates confusion." "I found 47 files with systematic errors, all marked for retention despite being incorrect." Melissa's expression didn't change, but something shifted. "Those retention tags are part of our quality management system. They help us allocate resources efficiently. They represent patients who will be denied care. They represent complex operational reality." Melissa leaned forward. "We process millions of claims annually. Perfect accuracy isn't possible. We aim for optimized accuracy, catching critical errors while maintaining sustainable operations." "Who decides which errors are critical?" "Risk management and actuarial teams. It's above both our authority levels." Melissa stood. "Focus on your assigned work. Let senior teams handle systematic analysis." "Can you do that?" "I need time to think." "Don't think too long. We'd hate to lose someone with your potential." Back at her cubicle, Claire stared at her draft email to CEO Richard Hale. If she sent it through company servers, Melissa would intercept it. Legal would bury it. She'd be fired. She needed a different approach. That evening at the public library, Claire researched Richard Hale's personal connections. Through old Harvard newsletters and careful phone calls, she obtained his personal email address, one the company didn't monitor. She created an untraceable account. Subject: "You approved a memo 3 years ago that killed my father." She attached 3 files, the memo with his signature approving acceptable error rate adjustments, her father's denied claim, and Thomas Reed's file showing the same pattern. Then one sentence, "How many more are there and do you care?" Her finger hovered over send. This was it. The moment the shy girl stopped being invisible. The moment safety ended and truth began. She thought about her father's last question. Did they say why? She thought about Thomas Reed, 72, alive because she'd spoken up once. She thought about 47 files. And how many more she hadn't found. Claire pressed send. Her phone buzzed. "Jennifer, heard you're under review. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Just doing my job." Another message from HR. "We need you to sign some paperwork. Can you come in Monday morning?" Claire didn't respond. Instead, she sent copies of everything, the files, the memo, the patterns, to 3 journalists who'd written about healthcare fraud, 2 state regulatory agencies, and a nonprofit that protected whistleblowers. She knew most leads would go nowhere. That systems protected themselves. That one shy girl with a spreadsheet was easy to dismiss. But silence was how systems like this survived year after year, claim after claim, death after death. And this decision to finally speak felt like the first real breath she'd taken in 3 years. When being invisible becomes a choice instead of a condition, what will you risk to be seen? The weekend passed in careful preparation. Claire documented everything on encrypted drives and researched whistleblower protection laws. What she didn't prepare for was how calm she felt. For 3 years, she'd carried her father's death like a stone in her chest. But now, having spoken the truth, she felt something unexpected: peace. Monday morning, she walked into Hale Care at 8:30 a.m. Her badge worked. The elevator accepted her floor. Everything seemed normal until she reached her cubicle. Her computer was gone. In its place sat a manila envelope with her name on it. Claire opened it, a letter informing her of immediate administrative leave, a check for 4 weeks' pay, and a non-disclosure agreement requiring her signature. The NDA wasn't just confidentiality, it was silence. Sign this, and she'd be legally prohibited from discussing anything she'd found. She walked to HR. Sandra was waiting. "Claire, we're placing you on temporary leave while we conduct an internal review. We need that NDA signed. And if I don't sign, then we'd have to question whether you're interested in a good faith resolution. I need to think about it. You have until Friday." In her car, Claire's phone rang. Unknown number. "Ms. Morgan, Detective James Chen from the State Insurance Fraud Division. We received your documentation. I'd like to meet to discuss what you found. We're evaluating whether there's sufficient evidence. Can you meet tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Yes. And Ms. Morgan, don't sign anything from your employer until we've talked." Claire drove to the library and logged into her secure email. 3 messages waited. A journalist. "Your story needs to be told. Can we talk?" A nonprofit. "We'd like to help you navigate this." The third was from Richard Hale's personal account. Subject: "I'm sorry. Ms. Morgan, I received your message. I've spent 72 hours reviewing the memo you sent. I owe you an apology no email can convey. I owe your father his life back, and that's something I can never give. I signed that memo 3 years ago. I approved the acceptable error rate adjustments because it would save money. I told myself it was just business. I was wrong. I don't know how many people have been harmed, but I'm going to find out, and I'm going to fix it. If you're willing to meet with me, I'd be grateful. Richard." Claire read it 3 times. She didn't trust it. CEOs didn't admit culpability in emails, but something in the tone felt genuine. She typed back, "Coffee, Wednesday, 10th a.m., 5th Street, you're buying, and bring every file showing the full scope of what you've done." Tuesday morning, Claire met Detective Chen at a quiet cafe. "Ms. Morgan, the pattern you've identified is significant. but proving intentional fraud versus negligence is difficult. We'll need internal communications testimony from other employees, evidence that leadership knew this would harm patients. He paused. Are you prepared? Your name will become public. You'll face intense scrutiny. They'll paint you as disgruntled, unreliable. Claire thought about her father, about Thomas Reed, about the thousands she suspected existed. I'm prepared. Good, because this is going to get much worse before it gets better. By Wednesday morning, Claire had received a cease and desist letter from Hale Care's attorneys, 3 threatening emails from anonymous accounts, and a text from Jennifer. I'm sorry. I wish I'd been braver. Richard was already at the coffee shop looking exhausted. No suit, just jeans and a sweater. He stood when she entered. Claire, thank you for coming. He slid a thumb drive across the table. Everything I could access. 5 years of claim data, internal memos, board meeting minutes, all of it. Claire picked it up. Why are you doing this? Because you were right, and because staying silent makes me complicit. He met her eyes. I want to fix this. I know that doesn't undo the harm, but it's what I can offer. The moment you realize the monster was you all along, that's when the real story begins. Richard Hale had read Claire's email on Sunday morning. At first he thought it was spam, some angry customer lashing out. He almost deleted it. But the attachments stopped him. The memo, his signature, the calculations showing exactly how much the company would save by allowing certain errors to persist. He remembered signing it. The CFO had presented compelling data: $17 million in annual savings, less than 2% increase in contested denials. Minimal risk, they'd called it. Acceptable loss. The second attachment, James Morgan's claim, made him sick. J18.9 instead of C3490. Pneumonia instead of lung cancer. A mistake that should have been caught in minutes. The third attachment showed the same error 3 years later, caught only because one auditor refused to look away. Claire Morgan, James Morgan's daughter. Richard spent the next 72 hours pulling files and confronting a truth he'd avoided for years. He'd built a company that optimized profit by optimizing death. Sitting across from Claire, Richard felt the full weight of what he'd done. I grew up poor, he said. My mother was a nurse, single parent. When she got sick, breast cancer, we almost lost everything. I promised myself I'd never be that vulnerable again. So I learned the system, went to Harvard, built this company. I told myself I was making healthcare more efficient. But really, I was just making sure I'd never be on the wrong side of it again. You made sure you'd be the one deciding who lives and who dies, Claire said quietly. Yes, I did. How many people were harmed by your policy? I don't know yet, but based on what I've seen, thousands, maybe tens of thousands. The number hung between them. My father was one, Claire said. Thomas Reed was almost another. How many more are dying right now while you analyze data? Too many. Which is why I called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. I'm presenting your evidence, recommending we halt all claim reviews, implement immediate corrections, and create a restitution fund. Melissa Grant will fight you. She already is. She says exposing this will destroy the company. He looked directly at Claire. She's probably right, but I don't care anymore. Claire studied him. Why should I believe you? You could be recording this, building a defense. You shouldn't believe me. Verify everything. Work with the investigators. Hold me accountable. He wrote something on a business card. That's my personal attorney's number. He's prepared to testify that I'm waiving attorney-client privilege. If I back out, he'll confirm everything. What happens to me? Claire asked. I violated confidentiality, accessed files without authorization. Your company will say I stole proprietary information. My lawyers will argue that. But I'll make sure the board knows the truth. You followed your conscience when everyone else, including me, chose profit. He paused. I can't promise you'll get your job back, or that this won't hurt your career. But I'll spend whatever credibility I have left making sure people know you were right. Claire picked up the thumb drive and stood. I have a meeting with state investigators this afternoon. Give them everything. I'll cooperate fully. You'll lose your company. Maybe your career. Definitely your reputation. I know. Then why? Because my mother survived her cancer. She got 20 more years. She met her granddaughter. His voice wavered. James Morgan didn't get that. Thomas Reed almost didn't. And I'm the reason why. That's not something I can live with anymore. Claire left without another word, but as she walked to her car, she felt something shift. Not forgiveness, that would take time, but recognition that change required people to choose differently than they had before. That afternoon, she met with Detective Chen and handed over Richard's thumb drive along with her documentation. He promised a thorough investigation and warned her it would get ugly. She was ready. By evening, news had leaked. Hailcare CEO admits to systematic claim manipulation, read one headline. Whistleblower reveals healthcare giant's deadly cost-cutting scheme, read another. Claire's phone exploded with calls from reporters' advocacy groups and former patients. Her name was public now. The shy girl who'd spent 29 years invisible was about to become very visible. She turned off her phone and sat in her quiet apartment, thinking about her father. I found out why, Dad, she whispered. And I'm making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. And sometimes something was all you could offer. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, even when everything you've built is about to crumble. The board meeting lasted 8 hours. Richard called Claire afterward, his voice hollowed out. Melissa's gone. Terminated for cause. The CFO resigned. 3 board members stepped down. The rest voted to implement your recommended reforms. What reforms? Everything. Full audit of 5 years of claims. Restitution fund for affected patients. New oversight department that reports directly to the board. He paused. They want you to run it. What? Director of Ethical Audit Compliance. Independent authority. You'd build your own team, set your own protocols. Claire's instinct was to refuse. But then she thought about Thomas Reed. About the thousands more that needed someone to care. I need conditions, she said. Name them. Full access to all files. No executive privilege. If I find criminal behavior, I report it to authorities, not to you. Agreed. Separate office, not in the main building. We can arrange that. And one more thing. Every year on my father's death anniversary, the company funds a free medical coding workshop for patients and families. So they can understand their claims. So they can fight back when systems fail them. Richard was quiet. I'll have it written into the company charter. When do you leave? 6 months, maybe a year. Long enough to make sure the reforms happen. Then I'll step down. And Melissa? The state attorney general is reviewing evidence for potential criminal fraud charges. I've agreed to testify. I'll take the job, Claire said. But I want to meet with affected patients first. I'll arrange it. 3 weeks later, Claire stood in a hotel conference room. 23 people whose claims had been miscoded, delayed, or denied had accepted the invitation to meet her. My name is Claire Morgan. 3 years ago, my father died because of a coding error that should have been caught but wasn't. What I found was that it wasn't an accident, it was a policy, a calculated decision to let some people fall through the cracks if it saved money. She looked at each person. I can't give you back what you lost. What I can offer is this: I will spend every day making sure it doesn't happen to someone else. I will build a system that prioritizes accuracy over profit. And I will never look away when something is wrong. Thomas Reed raised his hand. What happens when the company decides it's too expensive to keep doing the right thing? Oversight, Claire said. My department will publish quarterly reports on claim accuracy rates, error patterns, and patient outcomes. Anyone can access them. Journalists, advocates, government agencies. We're building transparency so that hiding mistakes becomes impossible. A woman whose husband had died spoke up. Why should we trust that you won't become just like them? You shouldn't trust me automatically, Claire said. You should hold me accountable. If you see something wrong, report it. If I fail to address it, escalate to the board, to regulators, to the press. The only way this works is if we're all watching. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Some left still angry. Others seemed cautiously hopeful. Afterward, Thomas Reed approached her. I taught high school English for 37 years. I saw a lot of brilliant but quiet students, the ones everyone overlooked. He smiled. They were always the ones who changed things when they finally spoke up, because they'd been watching and understanding the truth while everyone else was too busy talking. Claire felt tears prick her eyes. I should have spoken up sooner. You spoke up when you were ready, and when it mattered most. Thomas put a hand on her shoulder. Your father would be proud. After everyone left, Claire stood alone in the empty conference room. Somewhere out there, people were receiving claim denials. Errors were being made. Systems were failing the vulnerable. But now at least someone was watching. Someone who knew the cost of silence. Someone who would never look away again. Claire picked up her bag and headed to her new office, a small space 3 blocks from HaleCare headquarters, where she'd begin building a team of auditors who shared her commitment to accuracy over efficiency, truth over profit, people over numbers. The shy girl had finally found her voice, and she was going to make sure it counted. Real change doesn't happen in moments. It happens in the daily choice to keep fighting even when no one's watching. 18 months later, Claire stood in her office reviewing the latest quarterly report. The Office of Ethical Audit Compliance had grown from her and a laptop to a team of 12 auditors, 3 data analysts, 2 patient advocates, and a direct reporting line to both the HaleCare Board and state regulatory agencies. The small office that had started as a temporary space now occupied an entire floor with windows overlooking the city and walls covered in tracking boards that documented every claim under review. They'd identified 3,847 systematically miscoded files. Some patients had already passed away, their families never knowing that insurance errors had stolen time they couldn't recover. Others had survived but carried medical debt that should never have existed. A few, like Thomas Reed, had been caught just in time. Every single person received contact from Claire's team. Every single person received either restitution, debt forgiveness, or both. And every single person received something money couldn't buy: acknowledgement that they'd been failed by a system that should have protected them. The work was exhausting. Claire spent her days reviewing coding patterns, training new auditors, testifying before regulatory committees, and explaining to board members why accuracy couldn't be negotiated. She spent her evenings responding to emails from patients, families, and advocates who'd heard about HaleCare's reforms and wanted to know if their insurance companies would follow suit. Some did. Most didn't. But the conversation had changed. Healthcare companies could no longer hide behind the language of acceptable loss without facing public scrutiny. On the third anniversary of her father's death, HaleCare held its first annual medical coding education workshop. Over 400 people attended: patients, family members, community advocates, healthcare workers who wanted to learn how to spot errors and fight denials. Claire taught the opening session walking participants through the basics of diagnosis, coding claims submissions, and appeal processes. She showed them how to read their insurance documents, how to question denials, how to fight back when systems tried to make them disappear. At lunch, a young woman approached her, maybe 25, with tired eyes that looked older than her years. "Ms. Morgan, I wanted to thank you. My mom died last year because her cancer treatment was delayed. The insurance said it was a coding error, but by the time they fixed it..." She couldn't finish. Claire took her hand. "I'm so sorry. Your workshop had taught me what to look for. I've been going through my mom's files, and I found more errors. Ones that happened before the big delay. Ones that might have made a difference if someone had caught them earlier." She wiped her eyes. "I'm filing appeals. Probably too late. But at least I understand now what happened to her." "It's not too late for accountability," Claire said gently. "If you find evidence of systematic errors, document everything. Then contact my office. We'll help you." After the woman left, Thomas Reed appeared beside Claire. He came to every workshop, volunteering as a patient advocate, sharing his story with anyone who'd listen. "Another life touched," he said quietly. "Another life broken," Claire replied. "We can't fix what's already been destroyed." "No. But we can make sure she doesn't face it alone." Thomas gestured to the crowded room. "Look at what you've built, Claire. A year and a half ago, you were one shy girl with a spreadsheet. Now you've got 400 people learning to fight back. That's not nothing." Claire looked around the room. She saw elderly couples taking notes, parents asking questions about their children's claims, healthcare workers recording information to bring back to their communities. This was the heartwarming legacy her father had left, without knowing it. Not just his death, but the determination it had sparked in his daughter, to make sure others didn't suffer the same fate. That evening, after the workshop ended and the volunteers had packed up, Claire returned to her office. She pulled out her father's photo, the one that sat on her desk every day, reminding her why this work mattered. "We trained 400 people today, Dad," she said to the photograph. "That's 400 families who won't be as lost as I was when the system failed you." Her phone rang. Richard Hale calling from his personal number. He'd stepped down as CEO 8 months ago, but remained on the board as an advisor during the transition period. "Claire, I wanted to let you know the Attorney General filed charges today. Melissa Grant and 2 former board members are being indicted for healthcare fraud. They're looking at significant prison time if convicted." Claire sat down heavily. She'd known this was coming, but the reality of it still felt surreal. "How do you feel about it?" she asked. "Relieved. Guilty. Grateful I cooperated early enough to avoid the same fate." He paused. "I should be there with them. I signed the same documents, made the same choices. You also chose to fix it. They didn't. That doesn't erase what I did." "No," Claire agreed. "But it's the difference between continuing harm and stopping it. That matters." After they hung up, Claire sat in the quiet office watching the city lights flicker on as evening descended. She thought about the inspirational journey she'd been on, from invisible auditor to public advocate, from silent sufferer to vocal reformer. But she also thought about the reality behind the inspiration, the patients who hadn't survived, the families still grieving, The brokenness that couldn't be undone no matter how many systems they fixed. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was justice, messy, incomplete, hard-won justice that would take decades to fully realize. But it was something. Thomas Reed's words echoed in her mind. Your father would be proud. Claire hoped that was true. She hoped that somewhere, somehow, her father knew that his death hadn't been meaningless, that his shy girl had found her voice, that she'd used it to save people he'd never meet. She picked up her bag and headed home, already planning tomorrow's work. More files to review, more patterns to track, more people who needed someone to care about them. The work was never done. But then again, justice never was. Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we inspire others to carry forward.